Welcome back and good morning, everyone. This is Sheepdog Smokey, and this one's going to be a little bit longer because we're going to go through this whole thing. But this is from the Libertarian Republic 12 Things You Need to Know About Gun Violence. Now, I'm not going to read everything verbatim because this is something that is going to be a rather long one, but I do want to go through this because these are facts that are not being spoken of in the mainstream media. There isn't just one thing, there's a dozen things you should know. Following the shooting at Umpqua Community College, the reactions have been, as they always are, predictable. It comes from all sources: gun bans, mental health screenings, article after article telling us what we can do to fix the horrors of gun violence, school shootings, and troubled young people shooting up their communities. But there are a few things everyone could stand to learn about gun violence. First of all, I will say this very short, very sweet, and very clear. It is not the tool used, it is the person using it that needs to be addressed. The homicide rate in the U.S. is at its lowest since 1966. Violent crime nearly quadrupled from 60 to 91. But since the 90s, however, violent crime in the U.S. has declined steeply, and over the last 20 years by nearly 50%. And you can see the graph breakdown here. Moving forward, most gun crime is gang related. Putting aside the fact that most gun deaths are suicides, a large percentage of firearm homicides are gang related, and they do vary state to state. But very simply, it's not Joe Blow who owns a firearm legally and then goes crazy that does this. It's already been proven that criminals who already break the law are the ones breaking other laws. If you look at most shootings, the AR-15 is not the weapon of choice. Pistol is, then shotgun, then others. But facts never come into play in these arguments. Moving on to point number 3. 4 of the 5 deadliest mass shootings were not in the U.S. Of course, we have Anders Breivik in Norway. Then we have Tunisia, Australia, Virginia, and Israel. So you'll notice that of the top 3, none were in U.S., and all of them were in areas that supposedly have gun control, save maybe Israel, where teachers are armed and trained to deal with psychopaths. Moving on, point number 4. The deadliest mass killing at a school wasn't with a gun. I've brought this up several times. The Bath disaster of 27 in Michigan. Bombs. 44 dead with a bomb. Not a mention of it today because it doesn't fit the narrative. The narrative is it's those evil guns. It's those horrible guns. The second you touch a gun, you become possessed by a demon from the ninth circle of hell. Hell just bent on destruction, death, and mayhem. So just give up those evil guns and the world will be better. And just don't look at cities like Baltimore, Chicago, or countries that ban guns altogether, like the UK, where crime still exists and is rampant. The fact that the UK is trying to now ban knives and track those they can't ban, the fact that Chicago is as horrible as it is, should prove to you that gun control does nothing but embolden criminals. Moving on, point number 5. The majority of mass shootings are inside a home. A mass shooting is a situation where 4 people are killed with a firearm. 4. Most of them in homes. And that honestly is not because of a gun. I personally live alone. I lost a good job back in 2004. My parents were kind enough to bring up that I'd been wanting to go back to school for some time. I had a couple of months left on my rent that I had already paid, so I went to Tyler to stump for Louis Gilbert, came home. My parents said, move home, drive pizza, go to school. Hardest decision I've made in a long time, but I did. Graduated 5 years after I started because of working a lot of hours. And then a couple of years later, after sub teaching and working retail, I got a really good job and I started building a home on the lot next to my parents because they do need my help in a lot of things. So I live alone. But during the time from 2005 to 2012, I lived with my parents, as did my nephew, and of course both parents, and from time to time my brother. My father and I have been firearms owners since we were legally allowed to. For my father, he was much younger than me because he was born in 1950, before the age of guns are the problem. Uh, but when I turned 21, I bought my first pistol. It was a stupid purchase. It was a horrible model, and it stovepiped and jammed every time I tried to use it. So I returned it to that dealer, who returned it to the manufacturer, and I bought a different one, and I loved it. It was a Charles Daly model, 1911, and my father had one as well. We used them until, unfortunately, they sat in a puddle of water due to a tornado, and we sold them to the dealer who was going to have them refinished. But if you look at this, that's a minimum 20 years of two people in the same home owning firearms. Nothing's ever happened. My firearms have been used exactly 3 times outside of practice time and competition. All 3 of them against predatory animals, 2 coyotes and a skunk. And the skunk is really just a varmint. The coyotes, shotgun blast to the ground, they run. The skunk died, and we wore face masks and breathers if we could. But that's in 20 years. I've never had a reason to pull my firearm on anyone. And this should tell you why. It's not owning a firearm, it's tension in the home. It is someone already being violent in a home. And if they're already violent, having a gun or not won't change their mind on what they're going to do. Number 6, school shooting numbers are skewed. Though school shooting brings to mind an event like Columbine or recent news, there are many organizations tracking these shootings and listing them online. And of course, they have their own goals. Every town identifies a school shooting as any instance in which a firearm was discharged within a school building or on school grounds, sourced to multiple news reports per incident. Therefore, the data isn't limited to mass shootings like Newtown. It includes assaults, homicides, suicides, even accidental shootings. A quote from WAPO. So, Joe Criminal decides that he doesn't like his girlfriend talking to other people. He knows that she works at a McDonald's next to a school and walks past that school on her way home. He sees her talking to her boss while sitting on the school parking lot at 10 o'clock at night and shoots the boss. Every town identifies that as a school shooting. So the numbers are skewed right there. There is no logic, there's no consistency in any of this. And that's the way these idiots want it. Number 7, mental health screenings for guns won't really change things. It's true. Mental health is a very broad subject, very wide topic. At one time in my life, I probably could have been described as depressed, which is after I proposed to my then girlfriend. She said yes. We began the couples counseling that our pastor required. We began planning the wedding. We were down to putting deposits on things. The very next week after this next thing happened, we were planning to put deposits on the caterer, the florist, and the chapel. And a week before we did all that, she called everything off, told me she never wanted to get married, and moved out. A month later, she was married to someone else, and 6 months later, she was dead. So yeah, you could say that I was probably a little depressed right around that. But a year later, thanks to counseling with my fire department's chaplain, to good friends, most of them registered nurses, and working my butt off 60, 65 hours a week to stay busy and tire myself out, I came out of it. Mental health is going to find that, and they're going to say, well, you should never own a gun because a horribly tragic and horrible situation happened, and for a few months you were upset about it. Most psychopaths and sociopaths are very good at hiding it. We don't just need to look at people like at figures like the Joker or uh, Harley Quinn or those, because those are the exception to the rule. People who are that far gone are the exception to the rule when it comes to criminal behavior. When you look at gang members, when you look at thugs, when you look at abusers, they seem normal until something makes them snap, and we never know what that trigger is. So, this is exactly right. Mental health screenings are not going to solve a thing. And no one wants to admit that because they can't use it then to take away guns. It's really hard to take away people's guns. Pretty much the only way to do it is wait till they die, natural causes, and then say you're not allowed to bequeath them or kill them early. If you look at Florida, and that one I'm going to hold off on because that's an older story, but if you look at it, in August of 2018, there were over 400 people ordered under a red flag law to surrender their firearms. The law was worded a little bit better, though, because it allowed them to go to refuse, which then required law enforcement to get a warrant, which requires a lot of proof. But I believe it's Maryland, where it may have been Connecticut, where a man was shot and killed by police who executed the no-knock warrant because someone had said the man was a danger to himself and society. He refused. He resisted and was shot and killed. And then after that, we find out the person who reported him had lost an argument and was pissed off. Yes, quite literally a situation of, how dare you prove me wrong? I'm going to punish you by having your guns taken away, and then you end up dying. I really hope the idiot who instigated all of it goes to jail for a long time, much like the idiot from California who swatted someone and led to their death. I think it should be life because I think that should be considered the same as murder. You caused it. But I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, I'm not a legislator. Moving on to our next point. We really just need to have more empathy. Oh, dear Lord, if we could actually get liberals to practice what they preach, to be tolerant, and to actually try to see the world from other people's perspective, we might actually solve things. And you can look around. You can see people who are isolated. You can see people who are lonely. You can see people who are going through something bad. There's a post that goes around about every 6 months on Imager. And no, I will not tell you who I am there. But there's a post that goes around about every 6 months or so on Imager where a dad is dropping his son off or picking him up at kindergarten or elementary school otherwise. And he sees this one bench in the parking lot with a concrete base and some kind of paint on it, and he says, "Is that the only place you have to sit down?" And the boy goes, "No, that's the buddy bench. If someone feels lonely, then they sit here, and then someone will come ask them to play." The dad asked the boy, "Did you ever use it?" He said, "Yeah, when we moved here, I didn't know anybody, and I felt really lonely, so I sat down here, and then someone asked me to play." And that honestly shows the wisdom of children and the wisdom of those who work every day with them. If we would look around for people who are emotionally or psychologically in that picture's position, and in some cases, all you have to do is let them know you're available. They're not ready to open up, they're not ready to talk. But if they know someone is available, then that sticks in their mind as, wait a minute, I don't need to jump to this radical idea. I don't need to do this horrible step that's a million steps at once. I have someone who's available. Sometimes they crack and open up right then. Sometimes they're just lonely or they're just tired. And having someone step in and say, "Hey man, I'm here," helps them overcome that difficulty in their life. I can tell you, when my fiance left me and a month later was married and 6 months later was dead, if it hadn't been for my chaplain and those nurses and my friends, I'd be a different person than I am today. Empathy's not always enough. We have Elliot Roger, a family friend, had spent a lot of time and energy trying to help Roger with his problems and help him adjust, and it didn't stop him. Unfortunately, that is the case with some. I don't know that how much empathy would have worked for Nicholas Cruz, especially once we found out from Emma Gonzalez that she was one of the people bullying him, as she admitted that and then defended herself saying, "You didn't know him." So there is a point where everyone goes past their breaking point. But had law enforcement actually done their job, when someone reported him to the FBI for making that comment about being a school shooter on YouTube, when someone reported him to the police for assaulting the people he lived with, I believe it's his aunt or maybe his grandmother, had anyone done their job prior to Parkland, Cruz would have been in jail or a mental institution against his will without being able to check out long before he could do anything. And this is the case where empathy doesn't work. If you are able to identify the people that empathy is not working on, then you can notify authorities. You don't need a red flag law to tell authorities about red flags in your life. Because, and I'm not 100% sure, I don't remember the Elliot Rodger case myself off the top of my head, but looking at Parkland, a history of violence against those he lived with, uh, fanciful statements on YouTube, and then the criminal statement that he's going to be a school shooter. That should have had the FBI stepping in and telling the sheriff's department there in in no time at all to go and get him. He needs to be evaluated, and he may need to be removed from society. But thanks to rules put in place under Barack Obama, they had to wait until he killed people to do anything. And that's no one's fault except the people who did not act. And it's just sad. Of course, regardless, empathy is still our best bet. You try empathy. Always try it. I'm not going to hang out on this one long, but you try empathy before you do anything else. My friends didn't jump right to, he's depressed, we need to report this to somebody. They came to me, they talked to me, they let me know they were available. And for me, it worked. I was just going through a situation that honestly I hope no one ever goes through, but not everyone is the same way. And if you try it, if you try talking and being available and so on, then you might figure out it works. And in some cases, sadly, it doesn't. But always try. And then you can move forward from there. And then finally, at the end of the day, there isn't just one thing we can do. Of course, keeping the guns out of the hands of the dangerous seems like a good idea, but it's difficult to implement. It can violate people's liberty, and well, good luck trying. Can we start with disarming the cops then? Having empathy for others can help us prevent some of these horrible crimes. We need to take a look at the other components to gun violence, such as the drug war and domestic abuse, as the school shootings we fear aren't as common as we think. We need to be very careful when we talk about disarming certain groups of people. I won't get Godwin's law on you, though I could, but the NRA supported gun control against the Black Panthers, and also, frankly, I don't think civilians should be rendered defenseless against an increasingly hostile police force. At the end of the day, we can't save or fix every single person who is hell-bent on murdering people, but we should always try when we can. And this is exactly true. We've seen this cartoon before. There isn't just one thing that can be done. It's a multifaceted and very complex issue. But there's one thing that should be at the top of the list as far as protecting the innocent and stopping criminals. And that is, stop trying to disarm the people who've done nothing wrong. The Black Panthers were and still are a very violent group. So while I don't think we should say, "Oh, you're a member of the Black Panthers, you lose your 2A rights," but I think that very violent group should be observed. And if there is a reason to disarm one of them and convict them of a crime, go through the courts. I don't agree with can we start with the police, because that's a stupid statement, honestly. But like this says, it's not just one thing. There are a lot of aspects of this that we need to look at. We need to look at mental health. We need to look at domestic abuse. We need to look at people who've been abused as children. We need to look at criminals and how to curb their activity without restricting the law abiding. and it's never going to be easily done. But there's one thing under "Don't disarm the innocent" that should be also thought of. Don't do this only through Congress. Don't leave it to the people who sit protected behind walls and actual military weapons. Talk to the NRA, to the GOA, to Texas and U.S. Law Shield, to any and every group out there that advocates for law abiding gun owners. Talk to those law abiding gun owners. Listen to all of those groups. 90+% of Congress are lawyers, and no issue can be solved when 90+% of the people trying to solve it all have the same education and experience. You want to solve the healthcare crisis? You need lawyers, doctors, nurses, certified nursing assistants. You need healthcare professionals. You need hospital administration people. You need their patients. You need the patients' families. All of it. You need EMTs there. You need firefighters there. You need police officers there. Anyone and everyone who has any stake in the public health arena, which is everything from a parent taking their child to the doctor for the sniffles, to a cop pulling up on someone who's passed out in a driveway, to EMTs responding to a car wreck, to doctors performing a routine surgery on someone that they've known was coming for years, and everyone in between. With this, it's the same thing. You need politicians, you need lawyers, you need judges, you need the gun owners, you need people who advocate for the gun owners, you need police, you need counselors, you need pastors, you need teachers, you need them all. And all of those people need to listen to all the others. And no one person in that room should say, "I am the expert, obey me," which is exactly what Congress is doing. If you watched my video on Kamala Harris and her current stance and promise to take executive action if her demands are not met in 100 days, you would know that she's doing exactly what she's demanded President Trump not do, that being using the executive action. She's quite literally saying, "Obey me or I'll just do it." She is sitting in the circle saying, "No one else may talk unless you agree with me." And that's exactly what we don't need. But I've talked far long enough on this one. Let me know what you think. Again, I didn't read everything verbatim. Definitely go through, read it. And just remember to keep the comments civil. We do not learn from an argument, we learn from debate. As always, make sure to like, comment, and share this video, as well as to subscribe and activate notifications so that you are one of the first to know of any new content as it is posted. Until next time, everyone have a wonderful day.